birds, and welcome back to Ask an Ecologist. I'm Suzanne Simpson. I'm an ecologist with Bayou Land Conservancy in Houston, Texas, and this is going to be a great filming day. I can tell because it is raining right now, and also it is super loud over there. Any reasonable person would go ahead and move inside, but I'm abandoning reason, and I'm too stubborn. I'm staying out here, and I will just talk over everything and get all of my equipment wet. My equipment. It's a computer. Okay, I don't have a lot of equipment here. It's great to be back with you. I've been off for 2 weeks. I was out in the Arkansas Ozarks, which was a terrific trip, and then I was out at Caddo Lake. So I've been exploring Northeast Texas and Northwest Arkansas, which has been super awesome. The coolest thing that I found is something called an Ozark zigzag salamander. Never heard of it. I recommend you look it up. They're super beautiful. It was rainy up there. The tropical storm Beta came through and it gave enough rain to where the salamanders just started coming out of all of those crevices. So it was really cool to see those creatures. Today's Ask an Ecologist is at 4 p.m. rather than our usual 3 p.m. And that's because the Bayou Land Conservancy staff has been attending a virtual land trust conference all week called Rally. So normally we attend that in the city that it's hosted in, and this year it would have been Portland, but we ended up attending it online for obvious reasons, and it was great. We all learned a lot, and we're grateful to have been part of that experience. So let's dive back into it. I'm going to take a question from a viewer, and then we're going to chat about a favorite species of mine in the southeastern United States. So first, John Lane said that he is the inheritor of a small lot near Lake Conroe, and he's wondering if he can donate it to a nonprofit ecological organization to be kept as a nature preserve. That's certainly a possible use for that land. I would keep in mind that a lot of ecological nonprofits are pretty small, and that land ownership carries a lot of responsibility with it. And so you'll want to have a backup plan or two. One backup plan that is worth consideration is a deed restriction. So a deed restriction isn't as easy to enforce, and it isn't as permanent as a conservation easement, but it's something to have in your toolbox whenever you're trying to figure out how to conserve a piece of property. But whatever you decide, you want to make sure that you are planning ahead so that your intent can be passed on whenever you're not the steward of the land anymore. That's really important. A lot of people have intentions for their property and they want to get to it. They really do. But then something happens and, they're not able to conserve it the way that they wanted to, and it's really tough to convey those wishes if there's not like a legal document binding your wishes to it. So keep that in mind whenever you're thinking about what you want to do with the future of your property, and thank you for the question. Now, I am going to spend the rest of the time talking about the fateful tale of the red-cockaded woodpecker. The red-cockaded woodpecker is on my mind because during the fall, that's one of the seasons that's pretty good for prescribed burns for ecological managers. And the red-cockaded woodpecker is a species that is super dependent upon fire to get the habitat that it wants. So that kind of struck me in my mind, and I thought it might be a good time to talk about this species. So the red-cockaded woodpecker is an endangered species that actually lives in our area. And they're piney wood specialists. So this is my assistant, by the way. She's just come to say hi. They're piney wood specialists, and that means that they have evolved over many, many, many generations to adapt to the nuances of the piney woods ecosystem. The piney woods ecosystem is very prominent in North Houston and then into East Texas. So we're sort of on the edge of that piney woods ecosystem. And over many, many generations, the red-cockaded woodpeckers had adapted to the regimes of fire, those open, mature forests that you think of when you hear about the piney woods. Historically, they've been dependent on the wood of old-growth longleaf pines in order to make their nesting cavities. Red-cockaded woodpeckers are the only woodpeckers that will absolutely only make their nest cavities in living trees. But it's usually living trees that are old and have something called the heartwood rot or heartwood fungus that softens the wood. So I should have back up and tell you that red-cockaded woodpeckers are pretty small woodpeckers. They have a really small bill, and so they need the wood to be a little bit softer in order to make their cavity nest. So they really gravitated to these open growth, mature forests that have that the heartwood fungus that they're able to make their nests in. So unfortunately, the longleaf pines that they preferred were the same trees that were preferred by loggers whenever these areas were logged, especially in the early 19th century. And so these huge swaths of longleaf pine were cut down, and then they were replaced with species like loblolly pine, which were faster growing. And so, as these longleaf pine forests, old growth and mature, were replaced with these young loblolly pine forests, the red-cockaded woodpecker really lost its ecological niche in East Texas. And so, this presented quite a predicament for it as a species. And they're not alone in being the only animal that had a huge predicament after this deforestation happened. Another popular example of a piney wood specialist that disappeared is the ivory-billed woodpecker. So this was North America's largest woodpecker. It is widely considered to be extinct. There are some people that believe it's still around, but it's sort of the Yeti of the bird world. And this was another piney wood specialist that once that habitat was gone or degraded or fragmented, it was not able to persist as a species. So there were certainly other species of both flora and fauna, probably many of which we didn't even know about, were undescribed, that went extinct at that point, that were piney wood specialists. And unfortunately, after red-cockaded woodpeckers were placed on the Endangered Species Act, there was also some intentional destruction of suitable habitat by landowners that didn't want to have invasive species on their property. So it was sort of a harrowing, all of a sudden, this ecosystem that had been there for them for generations was all of a sudden fragmented, degraded, and almost gone in some places. So now that it is an endangered species, it's managed as part of the Endangered Species Act, there are many natural areas in the southeastern United States that are dedicated to the management of red-cockaded woodpeckers. And they're unique for another reason, because red-cockaded woodpeckers are considered an umbrella species. An umbrella species is a species that ecosystem managers will focus on and manage for, and in managing for that species, they're able to create important habitat, or habitat that's suitable to a lot of different species. So the cavity nests that red-cockaded woodpeckers create are used by like 20 plus other species at different times of their life cycle. So they're really helpful to have in an ecosystem. So there are a few land management activities that are implemented to create habitat that's suitable for red-cockaded woodpeckers. First and foremost is the reintroduction of prescribed fire. Not only does prescribed fire help rejuvenate the seed bank and provide chemical reactions in the soil, but it also helps manage the understory and the mid-story that are at risk of choking out native grasses and forbs that are really important foraging habitat. And instead, it knocks that back, it keeps the forest open, and it allows those fire-dependent pines to be able to thrive. So those more pyrrhic-dependent species are able to thrive whenever you have a prescribed fire regime. So reintroducing prescribed fire is a super important management technique for red-cockaded woodpeckers. Another thing that land managers will do is to actually create man-made cavities in suitable trees. So these man-made cavity nests will encourage red-cockaded woodpeckers to nest in suitable habitat. It sort of helps them select the best trees for their nesting. And in fact, some of them will, some land managers will actually use a little bit of white paint along the cavities that they create, and it sort of, it imitates the resin that will drip from a mature tree that has the heartwood fungus. And so the birds will recognize that symbol, and they will prefer those trees over others, and they'll use that as a space to make their nest. So a bit of clever management going on there. Another management practice that will take place is installing cavity restrictors. One of the biggest competitors of the red-cockaded woodpecker is another native species that is just a little bit more general in where it can live, and that's the pileated woodpecker. That is our largest woodpecker now that the ivory-billed woodpecker is no longer with us. And so pileated woodpeckers will find small nests of red-cockaded woodpeckers, and then they will basically double them in size and make it uninhabitable for the red-cockaded woodpeckers. So by installing cavity nest restrictors that prevent the cavity from getting bigger, you keep those nests safe for the red-cockaded woodpeckers that you're trying to manage for. And then whenever they don't need the cavity anymore, you can take it out and other species are able to use it as they need. Another important thing is deterring some of the most common predators of the red-cockaded woodpecker. So species like rat snakes that are great tree climbers and will get in there. And also squirrels are another common predator. So a couple things that you can do is have resin or kind of almost a Vaseline type substance along the tree trunk to help prevent rat snakes from climbing it. Another way to prevent that is certain types of bark shaving will prevent tree climbers, and then also you can use a scent deterrents to try and dissuade squirrels from going into cavity nests and taking out the young birds. So again, another unique, innovative pieces of management to try and deter those predators. And then lastly, if prescribed fire isn't possible because of environmental conditions, or if it isn't appropriate because of the location of your management area, you can also use mechanical vegetation clearing to try and limit the amount of overgrowth in the understory and midstory to keep those forests open and healthy for the red-cockaded woodpecker. So it sounds like a lot of work for a bird, right? But like I said, this isn't all management for one species. We may be managing for red-cockaded woodpeckers, but in doing so, we're creating healthy habitat for a whole host of piney wood specialists that without this management wouldn't be able to get the quality of habitat that they need to persist in these communities. Now, if you're interested in looking at what a red-cockaded woodpecker habitat looks like in practice, you can head up to the W.G. Jones State Forest in Conroe off of 1488. It's managed by the Texas A&M Forest Service very meticulously for red-cockaded woodpeckers, and you can actually see a red-cockaded woodpecker in person. You can go see an endangered species in person at that forest. If you see a little woodpecker that has a band on its leg, chances are you've just seen a red-cockaded woodpecker, and you can tick that off of your life list. It's one of my favorite places to go. It's really I find it to be very hiker friendly. There's also a lot of educational elements to that forest, and like I said, you can see nesting clusters of red-cockaded woodpeckers and see them live and in action. So I will leave you for now. Remember to submit your questions to Ask an Ecologist. We'll be creating a new Facebook event. So if you can't find the place to add a comment, feel free to send us a message on Facebook or send us an email at info@bayouland.org and send us a message on Instagram. You can contact us however you want, smoke signal. We would love to take your questions and we'll answer them right here every week, Thursday at 3 p.m. I'll see you next week.